Welcome to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health. My name is Josh, and on this episode, I got a chance to sit down with a couple filmmakers from some of the finest selections in this year's Salem-horror-fest. And on this episode, you guys will get to hear interviews with Christopher Bickle. He is the writer and director behind Bad Girls, one of this year's wildest rides. And then we also sat down with Devin Doss and Joshua Wallace, the writers and also director and lead actor of the black comedy / satire. And you'll hear why I put that / in there a little bit later in the episode for Keeping Company. Again, one of the best movies of this year. And I hope you guys enjoy these interviews. And if you guys want to see video versions of them, go to our YouTube, which will provide links in the show notes below. And remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you. Have a good one. If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Hey, what's up?
Man, this is so awesome. My name is Captain Nostalgia, by the way. I'm one of the writers and podcasters here. If you guys are new to us, make sure that you guys like, follow, and subscribe below. But Chris, let's talk about Bad Girls, this absolutely insane, just bat crap crazy movie that I got out of the theater just to kind of give you a context. I got out of the theater, and one of our writers is in Alabama, loves metalcore, loves metal, hard rock, all that stuff. And I was like, dude, you gotta see this movie. If it comes anywhere near you, you gotta see it. And I just sent him the trailer for it, and he was like, sold. I've shown this to a couple of friends of mine, but it's so hard to put into words. So can you please describe for our viewers just what Bad Girls is all about?
Okay, Bad Girls, it's kind of a road movie. It's sort of violent, kind of a throwback to 70s drive-in movies, except that it's not really done in that style. It's definitely a movie of its time. It just follows these three girls that go on this cross-country crime spree, and they end up kidnapping these rock stars and sort of discover what love is along the way. But then a lot of people get killed.
Yeah, I rewatched this Monday night, and I just remember getting to the end of the movie where they get to the third rock star's house, and it's just, this movie just goes bananas like multiple times. Like, this is a movie that just right out of the gate, from like the opening credits to probably like the first like 6 or 7 minutes, like, I mean, it just is like 0 to 90 Was that always kind of the intent for this film, was just to kind of throw viewers in and get them in as quick as possible?
Yeah, I wanted to set the story up, and sort of explain who these people were and how dangerous they were, but do it as quickly as possible, so that I didn't have to waste a lot of time with that part of it, so that I could kind of get into, who they really were, and so that I think the beginning of the movie they sort of start out as these sort of caricatures of like this violent girl gang, and then as the movie goes on they become real people, and that's really what I wanted to do. I wanted to get that stuff out of the way fast so that I could get to them being real people.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I really admire about this film, is the way that you kind of get these, like you said, like it feels like a 70s, almost like kind of like a grindhouse film, because one of the things I want to talk about here in a second is the musical choices that this movie has, because this movie is as much about the action and the blood as it is about the music. But as the film progresses, you kind of get to really know a lot of these girls. And the more that the film goes on, the more that I ended up really, as a viewer, really liking it. And I love the decision to kind of throw these like stereotypes right at this viewers as soon as they get in, and then flesh them out as the film kind of progressed. What were some of the challenges in writing and kind of mapping out these girls from start to finish?
Well, the biggest challenge really, and it's something that I still struggle with when I watch the movie. Of course, being a creator, I think all creators always second guess themselves, and they're never fully happy with the thing they've done. And my biggest challenge was that I had created all this momentum at the beginning of the movie, that 6 minutes that you described, where it's just like kind of nonstop violence and crazy things happening. And then when I do slow it down to kind of reveal who these people are, I feel like maybe there's like a promise of violence that's not delivered on, that some people might be disappointed by. I mean, for me personally, it's a story that I wanted to tell, but I have had some people come back to me and say, well, I thought it was going to be like balls to the wall nonstop the whole time, and then you sort of like put the brakes on there, like halfway through. And so, if you want to tell a story, and if you want characters that people care about, you kind of have to do that sometimes.
Absolutely, because I feel like without those softer, quieter scenes, you don't get those. I think the scene where it kind of starts to turn is the introduction of Christmas Tits, is kind of the turning point for one of the characters, and then eventually that pattern kind of repeats itself. And I think that by the end of the film, these characters actually feel fleshed out. And I think that to kind of just give you some hope here, I think that as a film viewer myself, I think that I need that kind of stuff and that kind of flesh out, because those are characters that I can relate to, and those are characters that are going to stick with me. And so even though I'm like going to friends and being like, you guys see this movie, like one of the reasons that I want you to see this movie is because of the story it tells, not only, but also at the same time, because the characters are real, and there's a level of realism and brutality that this movie brings.
Yeah, and I feel like it was a little bit of a struggle in trying to make these characters real, but also still have them uh, damaged. They're clearly, especially the lead character Val. She's seeking this sort of validation and what she thinks is love, but she goes about it in such a twisted way. And but I think in that you can still see that she's just like any other person, that everybody just wants to be appreciated and loved, and she just has a kind of a bent way of going about that. But I think anybody that watches it can still relate to her by the end of the movie. It's a very human trait to just want love and acceptance, and clearly that's what she's going for. But she's just surrounded herself with violence and death. throughout the entirety of the movie, and which makes the ending extra sad. But she kind of gets everything she deserves in some way, but you feel enough for her that you don't want to see it end in that manner. Hopefully, if I did my job right.
Yeah, you sow what you reap, and that the ending. I remember walking out of it the first time at Genre Blast and just being like, kind of like entertained, but also at the same time being like, that ending really like stuck to their guns. And that's one of the things that, again, I just, like I said multiple times in this interview, like I've really respected. It's a level of realism that I feel like we don't see a lot of times in film nowadays. Everything has to kind of have that happy ending to it, and that's not always how life is. And if you're going to reap sow violence, you're also going to reap that same violence.
Right. And another thing that I wanted to do was to maybe break the conventions a little bit with characters and storytelling. I'd like to say that the movie is really about Bart and Xerox, the two rock stars, and the relationship that they form. But their characters aren't really introduced until the second act. And so it might be a stretch for some people if I were to say like, oh, well, the movie's about Bart and Xerox, because they're really like not in the movie that much. But to me, it's sort of, they're thrown into this circumstance where it's almost like people meeting in the eye of a hurricane, and they find hope in each other because they're just thrown into this like ridiculous situation.
Yeah, it's interesting to gauge that through the lens of something like what we do with mental health awareness through the medium of film in particular, because you're right. Like, I think you absolutely captured it. Is here you find really hopeless circumstances, but yet people find hope in these really unlikely places. And the clerk whose name is escaping me at the moment. Rusty. Yeah, I knew it started with an R. I was almost going to say Randy, and I was like, that's not right. But yeah, Rusty, really kind of, we're introduced to him as kind of like this, like really depressed, nothing kind of goes right, really hopeless kid. And he ends up finding love throughout the course of this film, not to spoil anything about it, but like he ends up kind of finding hope in this really just twisted situation. Can you kind of talk about writing those like little moments of hope in this, as you put it, hurricane of insanity?
Well, yeah, to me, Rusty is the Luke Skywalker of this movie.
I love that.
He's the farm boy that gets swept up in the great adventure, and I intended for Rusty to kind of be maybe the voice of the audience. And I don't, and like I second guess myself on that because I don't know if I really nailed that down the way I wanted to. But my intent with him was that the audience would find themselves reflected in his character. I think most people, it's a pretty common experience for a lot of people that they have felt not necessarily bullied. I mean, that's one way to look at it, but just ignored. And not really, they didn't really fit in with the crowd. And I think Rusty is that. And I think anybody that watches it can see, if they've ever had that feeling, they can see themselves reflected in Rusty. Like anytime he tries to interject himself into the conversation with the cool kids, he's always shut down. But one of the cool kids does end up, appreciating him a great deal by the end of it.
Yeah, their relationship was something that I really admire about this movie, because it does show that, again, hope comes in multiple different facets and can come from people and relationships that you would never think by societal standards can become either friends and or even lovers and have a relationship like that. And it's really interesting. You bring up kind of like the way that he's bullied, and the majority of that bullying comes from Val, and even so much so that Mitzi at the end during the climax, kind of freaks out, and it's like her linchpin is like his name was Rusty. And you kind of get to really see how, even though here you have a bully, like if you have like here you have a victim of bullying, but yet because he has this The girl who also name escaping me at the moment.
That's that Carolyn.
Carolyn, yeah. So Carolyn and Rusty kind of have this like relationship that is like starting to blossom and kind of finding joy in one another. And again, it kind of goes to that finding hope in toxic situations.
Yeah, and I think that with Carolyn, you have this gang that's these three girls, and Carolyn is definitely not the alpha in this gang. And so I think she sees herself in Rusty a little bit too. She's along for the ride, but she never really has a voice. Like, she's denied her voice by Val, a few times in the movie. And so I think she sees, herself in him, and that's why they sort of bond together in that way.
So on the this movie is about the trio of girls, but on the other end probably come two of my favorite characters, and that is the police in this film. The two detectives, Special Agent McMurphy and who's the other guy's name? Cannon, yeah. So you have these two, and my first question with these two is they all have these like running gags that come throughout them, to where Cannon always is like kind of like over the top, but he also at the same time like always is like snorting saline. And then you have McMurphy that's like never in a frame without something to eat. Where did that idea come from?
I have no idea. I wish I could remember how I decided that's what his thing was going to be, but it definitely at some point I was like, yeah, this guy's just always going to like have some food. I think just kind of going back like cliches of cop movies where they're all like eating a hot dog all the time or whatever. But I saw like, well, I can't have him eat a hot dog the whole time. So I'm just gonna have him eat like some weird stuff. So he's eating a can of sauerkraut at one point. He's eating a pickle, and the funny thing is Dove, the guy that played McMurphy, had never eaten sauerkraut, and this will sound like I'm pretty sure he had never eaten a pickle before, and he was like this is really weird. And like, well, do you like it? And he's like I'll eat it.
Nice.
So yeah, so that was we laughed about it on set so much, and it's been kind of cool to see when the movie's shown in theaters with an audience that people just laugh every time they see him with some new like piece of food in his hand. I wasn't sure if that was gonna play at all. Like, I didn't know if people would notice it, but everybody did.
Oh, I did, and like I remember showing this to one of our writers, and the first time that McMurphy comes on the screen with food, I was like, all right. I paused the movie and I was like, watch these guys and their hands at all time, every time they're on the screen. And like watching it the other night, even just when the scene in particular where you mentioned with the pickle, like I was on the couch, like just laying down with my wife, and like I just had this like big like ball of laughter come out of me, because it's like it takes place in this like semi-serious moment, but then it's just a guy is just eating like a large pickle.
Yeah. And I was like I said, I didn't think that people were gonna really pick up on it. It was almost more like a private joke for me and the other people that worked on the movie, but it really played as far as the audience reactions go. So that was cool.
Yeah, I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite parts. There's another one in particular where we get to go to Wendell's ammo cafe, and he specializes in ammunition and bagels. Yeah. They're fresh bagels. Yeah. And they're going to investigate a crime scene, and like it's just a bloody crime scene, and he's just like casually eating a bagel, and I'm like, nothing upsets this guy.
Right. Oh, yeah.
But one of the other things too that I really enjoy about this movie is just the way that it has this, I guess, like the the closest term I can use for it would be like theme, to where it's heavily used in the beginning, and then it's used as the film goes on, but it's like this blend of like disco and thrash metal.
Yeah.
And can you kind of talk about where the idea to kind of balance those two genres came from?
Yeah, it's not something that I necessarily had thought about from the beginnings of it. I think that really came more in post production. I knew that I was going to have this guy Matt Akers do the score, and that he did all the electronic music, so he does all the disco music and really most of the score elements that aren't like metal or songs is all Matt Akers. So I knew he was going to be doing that stuff, and I definitely wanted disco for the beginning. And originally, the disco music was going to play over that entire opening montage, but then one of my special effects guys, this guy Jamie Clark, who did the visual effects on it, he's got this band called Sign Zoom Toad, and who I really like a lot. And I was like, man, like it'd be really cool to use some of their stuff. So I asked him, like, can I use one of your songs in the movie? And he said, sure. And I was trying to figure out where to put it. And then I was like, oh, like I'm just gonna play this like whenever there's violence, because the music itself is just so like chaotic and violent sounding that
Yeah.
it worked. I think actually thinking back, I hadn't thought about this since I cut the thing. Originally, I had considered having free jazz playing. I've got some friends that play jazz music, and they do like this crazy free jazz stuff, and that was going to play over the violent scenes. And but then when I found the Zine Some Toad music, I was like, oh no, it's going to be this for sure.
I absolutely love that. Like some of my favorite shots in this movie are set to that score. And I think it really enhances the violence. I love the fact that there's one scene in particular where one of the girls actually stabs somebody, and it's lined up perfectly to the music. And I was like, I don't know if this was like just a coincidence, but this is one of the greatest cinematic shots I've seen this year.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I definitely tried to line that stuff up to where action parts would sort of hit on the beats of the music. There's like a scene where they rob a bar in the beginning, and there's a part where the music drops out, and then that's where like they get the money from the cash register. Like you hear a cash register ding, like when the music stops. So I was trying to like move those pieces around so that they sort of landed on places that would almost act like punctuation marks on the scene.
Well, it absolutely comes through. This is one of my most recommended movies this year that I've been telling people to see. Currently sits at number 3 on my top 5 of the year.
Wow.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of movies this year.
Thank you.
I fall in love with this movie every time I watch it. So, where can people find like the screenings after Salem, and kind of like maybe even be like me and eventually get themselves a Blu-ray?
Yeah. So yeah, we didn't actually intend to enter a lot of festivals, but there's some that I'd done with my first film, The Theta Girl, that I wanted to hit a second time, and then there's some that just found out about the movie and then contacted me and offered spots. There were a few fests that reached out to us just because they'd heard word of mouth about the movie, and that was really cool. We only have a couple more fests, I think, that we're lined up to do, and then the movie's out there if anybody wants it. You can go to badgirlsmovie.com and follow the links, and you can get the Blu-ray. It's streaming in a few places. I'll probably end up putting it up on Amazon at some point. I kind of learned a hard lesson with my first movie when we got it up on Amazon. Like within minutes of it going live on Amazon, it had been downloaded and like sent to like 100 different bootleg sites. It was like all over the torrents and like all these Russian bootleg sites. Yeah, and it killed it. Like not that I do this stuff to make money, because there's really not money to be made in making these like underground films. But when you are trying to like recoup your money so that you can do the next movie, like to have it just like out there for free everywhere, like really like stops the income. And so that really killed us with the Theta Girl, my first movie. So I'm trying to monetize this movie as much as I can for right now before I decide I'm going to like put it out on Amazon, which, the trade-off is when it's on Amazon, it's out there and people can easily get it, and you have a much wider audience. You're going to have eyeballs on it.
Yeah.
But also all those bootleg sites have access to it as well.
Yeah. Well, you guys can find, like Chris said, you guys can find Bad Girls. The movie is badgirlsmovie.com. I cannot recommend this movie enough. It is a absolute just blast. It's hilarious. If you guys like action 70s throwback grindhouse movies, this is definitely the movie you guys check out. Chris, thank you so much for taking some time to talk about the movie, and hope this places more eyes on it.
Thank you so much. This has been awesome.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression, and to get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today. I'm not the only Josh on this call, but I'm sitting down with the writers, one of the director and one of the stars in the movie, Keeping Company, which we also got a chance to screen at this year's Genre Blast as well. Please help me welcoming the co-writer, and I don't know how you guys are watching this, but up here to my left is co-writer and director, Mr. Joshua Wallace. What's going on today?
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for having us. We're very excited to talk about the movie.
I'm so excited to talk about this. And joining me also on my right is Mr. One of the lead actors in this movie. Want to note that, and also at the same time, the other co-writer as well, Mr. Devin Doss. How are you doing this morning?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, man. Thanks for having both of us. We're excited.
I'm so excited about this. As I've teased to you guys, Keeping Company is one of my favorite movies this year. It is probably one of my top 3 films that I've encountered at one of the several fests we've covered this year. I absolutely love this movie. I constantly am telling people about it. I can't wait till it hits Blu-ray so I can show more of my friends. But this is such a weird movie to describe. Can one of you guys kind of just talk about what this movie is and kind of like an elevator pitch for those that have never heard of Keeping Company?
Yeah, how do we say it?
Sure. Yeah. I think we've somewhat refined this over the past year. Keeping Company is a biting social satire that explores the meaning and importance of class and wealth in our society by taking ruthless corporate salesmen and mixing them with vicious suburban serial killers and asking if you can tell the difference. I guess that's how we would pitch it.
You guys are like understating it so much of this movie. There's so many like twists and turns in this movie. And I think one of the things that I want to ask you guys first off, because it is such a challenging movie to describe to people. And part of the reason is because it doesn't quite feel like a straight up horror film. It doesn't quite feel like a straight up satire. It doesn't feel like a straight up comedy. It kind of marries all 3 of these genres, and the tonal shifts happen so starkly, but yet at the same time they are so smooth at the same time. Can you guys talk about the challenge of really just carving out the unique tone this movie has?
Yeah, I think that like Devin and I, we come from a comedy background. We both kind of got our started at Funny or Die and writing and making videos there, and kind of moved up our way through the kind of like the studio system side of things. We came up as assistants, and so we were kind of in this broad studio comedy world. And I think it was something where we knew we didn't want to just do straight comedy. Kind of being in that world, it just didn't feel like as, I don't know, as interesting to us. And we'd always loved horror. That was something we always shared in common. And so like Making Keeping was kind of setting out to kind of rebel against those comedic roots, and again do something that was like turning something on its head, because we originally started writing the script as kind of like a broad buddy comedy where it's like just two dudes get kidnapped in a basement by a weird guy, and then we started to kind of like put what we saw in the world, into it, kind of like what our thoughts were of like, this is kind of how the world seems like it is, and those darker thematic things started to come in. And with that, so that's where the tone just started to kind of like swirl into this tornado of satire and comedy and horror. And it was just like the way that we do it in the movie, obviously, like that horror element just seemed to serve the themes so well that we were trying to get across. And everyone that's involved in this movie also comes from a comedic background. All our actors, I think for the most part, outside of Susan and who played Grandma, and
even
Jacob.
Susan,
she has the chops for sure. It's not like
right.
She's so talented, and Jacob as well. Who again is more probably a traditional actor, but like for the most part, everyone in our cast is comedically rooted. So I think like putting them into this world and kind of having them play it, it wasn't like we were necessarily trying to be like, hey, say it. It's not like tell a joke or say something silly here. It's like you're playing a character and this character thinks this is the way the world is. So I think when you do that, like, and you have those kind of performers in there, again, it's just going to generate this kind of weird, interesting tone that we probably don't get to come across too often. I don't know if you want to add any more to that, Dev.
You summed it up pretty great. And I think the one thing that I would just add is like Josh said, we were starting to, the first few drafts of this were much more of a broad studio level buddy comedy. And we were just getting so uninspired by it. And we really took a step back. Obviously, we're talking about themes, but like Josh was just hitting on, like, we really were like, wait, we need to be focusing on this as a character-driven comedy. Like, let's not ask for laughs too much. Let's hope that people laugh at the ridiculousness of these people. It's like we looked at who inspire us the most, and the Coen brothers being part of that, and their writing in terms of the genre of farce and these absurd characters, but making real decisions that affect the world and their lives and stuff like that. So we were like, let's really lean into, what excites us and where we've always drawn inspiration from. But let's do it at a bigger level now. And so we just looked at the people that inspire us the most, and that helped us figure out how to walk the tightrope that is this tone. So, and when you have an ensemble, it's also really, in a sense, helpful, because then you can really, it just allows you to kind of bounce around with your cast and your storylines that you're playing around with, which isn't an easy thing, but it can also be helpful when it comes to tone, and making sure you're able to still provide levity when someone or some situation might be getting really dark. So
one of the things that really sold me on this trailer is, and equally the entire movie is kind of some of the, like you said, like there's a lot of performers that have background in comedy. Some of them are more recognizable than others, but you guys have a trio of characters in this that are I would regard as kind of like sitcom royalty. If you grew up in the 90s, you grew up in the early 2000s, obviously you're going to recognize Andy Buckley from The Office, William Russ, who is probably one of my favorite characters in this movie from Boy Meets World. And of course, Gillian Vigman from New Girl. Can you guys talk about what it was like to kind of, was it always the intention to kind of get these recognizable faces, or how did they kind of enter into the project?
Yeah, when it came to casting, I mean, especially with those specific actors and roles, we didn't do casting sessions. We didn't read people. We put together lists of, you put together lists of people that you might want in this role or who you might see in this role. And for us, it was, we're going to target, who we want for these roles. And we're just going to go out to them and we're going to try and get them on board and see if we can, through dealing with agents and managers, of course. But yeah, I mean, for us, it was just us really trying to think about who we thought would bring the characters to life the best. And we just targeted those people and went out. And like, it's just one of those things where it's like, I think the material spoke to them, which made them excited and want to jump on board. And, for Josh and I, this being our first feature, and it's really easy to have a bit of a complex and feel like you're not worthy to get to work with certain people or whatever. And, for us, it was just like, well, let's shoot our shot. And we were like blown away to see how people were reacting to the material, and they were down to get on board. And once, it wasn't always like an immediate, like, oh, they're on board, but it was like, we were able to have conversations and tell them like, this is what we're wanting to do. This is what we're thinking. This is where we're coming from. And that only helped our cause. So yeah, we just, that's how we went about it for pretty much our entire cast.
There's like a lot of this too, was really getting lucky with how amazing they are, just not only as performers, but as people, that they were just so down to come in and work with us. Like William Russ, especially, I think, we shot with him it was one day of shooting, and he came in and was like just amazing, like a guy who like was game for whatever, and really I like just got it, like immediately got what that role was. Yeah, I mean, like that's like one thing that, as we've gone through the rounds here, I don't think enough people talk about, that character in the movie, because it is that kind of like third layer that doesn't, it's there, it's fully there, but doesn't get touched on too much, or that political layer of kind of what we're saying as well. And yeah, like obviously, we grew up, I think I probably watched Boy Meets World like 3 times over. So like,
oh, yeah.
When you get to meet William Russ, it's he's it's really funny. Like it's so surprising how like funny he is, and it must be like you're not ready for it.
Oh, and also I just have to add too, he's really funny. Like he is the one character where it's like, oh, we're asking for laughs for most of his arc, but then at the end, like, I mean, it gets real, not like dark, but just like real. Like there's so much emotion that he brings into that one scene at the end, and I think really helps us draw, like the fact that he just understood who he was, who his character was, and that he didn't like, it was, I mean, him and everybody in our cast just brought so much creative energy to set that we were lucky. We were like, great, this is, we have people that we can really, it feels like you're playing with them, and you're playing make-believe with them in such a great way.
Yeah, and that's like the same thing. I'll say just one more thing about like even Jillian and Andy and everybody else, where it was like there wasn't like an ego. There was never an ego on set, which was really nice. Like everyone came and again just wanted to make a good movie. So again, we're very grateful to their participation.
Yeah. To your point though about William Russ, I wanted to kind of dig into his character just very briefly because, like the two of you guys have said, like it's kind of like an underlining like subplot that doesn't really bring a whole lot to the picture until it does. Like his arc completely transforms the way you see the movie once the big twist of his character is revealed. And the majority of the movie, we kind of see him like he's a politician that's running for re-election, and his entire campaign is sweeping up the streets and kind of really his platform is the homeless, and specifically like the drug addicts and kind of that are strung out. And I'm curious if you guys can talk about where the idea for his art came from, because like it's for 2/3 of the movie, it's just kind of like someone that's there that doesn't really connect to the overarching story that's happening with Sonny and Noah and Lucas and Grandma until it does.
That it's so funny to think back on this in our writing process with it, because it was, for us, we viewed this world like we looked at the corporate world, the insurance world, even though we weren't just trying to talk about insurance per se, but more our economic system. So we looked at like the corporate world, and we looked at the killer world, the madhouse world, as the same. To us, that it was the same, and that was our point, was to make sure that like you felt the parallels there, and to feel like they really were one and the same. And with that, we were like, well, that means at this whole world, everything needs to be connected, is how we felt. And so we wanted to bring in that aspect of a politician and politics. We don't say which party this person's a part of, because we kind of wanted it to be like, this is a purple tie person, this is a red and blue mixture. And the reason being is because the rhetoric that you hear, for us, it was like the understanding of like, it feels like that person, that spokesperson for society, is really there to create division and create confusion, yeah, while supporting the people that are actually in power, and further propping them up through their rhetoric or through through their politics and whatnot. So we wanted to make sure that we somehow brought his character and his arc into the storylines of our actual lead characters, which wasn't easy. We were pulling our hair out. We were trying to figure out like, how do we do this without it feeling forced, without it feeling, and whether or not we fully accomplished it, not feeling forced or not, is up for debate, I think. But it's like, we did it. Like we for us, we were like, we have to find some way that like this guy's role in society is married to the rich people's role in society. You know what I mean? Are they working in conjunction? Do they work in tandem, whether they actually know each other or not? And that's kind of what we were trying to get through there. And that's why Grandma is a supporter of his. We just wanted to show you visually, like, she supports him. They don't know each other, but she supports him, and I wonder why. It only helps her cause.
And that's like I think like it was like a lot of cause and effect too in the movie, where again, people outside of each other were affecting each other in ways that they didn't know, but it's all playing into the same system of things. And we definitely wanted that Glengarry character to be, William Russ, to be represented as just politician. Obviously in the film has you can kind of tell which way he leans, I think, ideologically on the political spectrum. But outside of that, we still, not to give anything away or anything like that, but like kind of we give him a reason why, though, the reason why he's like that, and that was important to us, like to show like, well, this is why he has this stance on this, and it's kind of a snake, and this is what the whole movie is a snake eating its own tail, where it's like, oh, this is just feeding into this, is feeding into this, which is feeding back into this. And again, really the only people that are getting or that are profiting from this are the ones that are on the top of that system. So it was definitely like an interesting, like at the end of it, it's like, kind of a crazy web that hopefully makes sense by the end.
Yeah, and I watching this a second time in preparation for not only this interview but also for our coverage of Salem, I had a finer appreciation with the way that you guys were able to kind of take these, like you had said, like these people that you don't really know that they're affecting each other, and they are. So you're weaving this very complex but very smart web of events and kind of really showcases. And I don't want to spoil too much with it, but I do have some more questions kind of regarding the deeper themes of the film. But before I get there, this film is very red and white. Can you guys talk about the importance of these colors?
Yeah, I mean, it's mainly red. Red was like the big kind of a very monochromatic look throughout the entire film, and that was like decided super early on, where we, again, and kind of what Devin was speaking to earlier, in seeing that, like, oh, we're dealing with these serial killers and we're dealing with this corporate world, and to us it, like, kind of ends up being one and the same of dog eat dog, whatever. And that being the case, it only made sense to make the world kind of one color. And what better color than red, which is, can be representative of anger and violence and blood, and whatnot. So we were very, very cognizant with the usage of color throughout the film. And I think if you're really paying attention as it moves along, the reds are getting darker. I think, like, you can see that in Paula's costuming. Like, she starts off bright red and ends up in a very dark red color. And obviously, it's so funny that, like, in the insurance world, and looking at, like, say, a State Farm or whatnot, that they just have that perfect, it's like creepy. Like one of our like like one of our I can't remember, it was like one of our kind of inspirational mood board images was just of like this group of State Farm agents in these red coats. It looks it's like culty. It's like so weird.
It's so creepy.
And like when you see it in the movie, to me it looks so heightened and kind of like hacky a little bit, but that's also kind of that's what it is in reality. So it's kind of like, I don't know. And again, that's like a thing that kind of shapes tone as well, as like when you see such heavy kind of color usage, I think that kind of like lets you're looking at a heightened world, and that we're going to be trying to communicate something to you, hopefully that you recognize it as satire. And then like the last thing I'll speak to about color is like we use the color blue. We use the color blue very sparingly. But blue to us was like kind of representative of hope. And we use it specifically one time in a big way, which is when Noah and Lucas are kind of doing their blanket fort. And, they throw it over, and now we're fully kind of engulfed in blue. And it's because these are really the only two characters in the movie who are actually connecting to each other and talking, and that there's hope there, and outside of that, really, it's just
the only other place you see it, and I won't say, I'll be very vague about this, is the very last shot of the movie. Very last scene is surrounded by blue. And there's one character who's surrounded by the blue, but it's not, that doesn't make it a good thing necessarily. But yeah, you really see that color like twice throughout the movie.
Yeah, That last shot is one of my favorite shots because it's ambiguous, but it also kind of leaves you with this sense of like, I just don't want, I'll let people see it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but kind of like what separates our publication from others is the fact that we look at mental health and we want to bring mental health to the conversation of these. And at the core of this film, like you guys said, you guys have Sunny and you have Noah, and they both kind of have these tragic backstories, for lack of a better word, where you have Sunny who has a father that is never really supportive and is never really kind of on his side. It doesn't matter no matter how much he ends up doing. Like he's always he's always it's never good enough in the eyes of his father. And that's actually one of the last scenes you kind of see with Sonny's character, and it kind of makes I'll just stop there. And then on the flip side, you have Noah, who has not only one of my favorite lines in this entire movie, but also has basically, like, as he puts it, like, mom and dad had me too early, couldn't afford another mouth. And so he ends up on this like doorstep of this environment. And when they get captured by Lucas, they both kind of see the world completely different, where you have Sonny is like, "Yo, we got to kill this guy." And then you have Noah who says, we're a product of our environment and we don't know what he's been through. Nobody's crazy for no reason. And I'm curious if you guys can kind of talk about both viewpoints, and if there's any, kind of personal touch into those characters, because, you write what you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, for both of those characters, you have the narcissistic. They're both selfish in their own ways, but Sonny, narcissistic sociopath.
Sure.
And you have Noah, who's very empathetic, and very sweet and caring, and wants to connect with people. And for us, we always saw them as just two the complete opposites. We always saw them as the opposites. I mean, even with Noah thinking they're best friends and Sonny just thinking they're coworkers, and us commenting on it the whole time. So for us, it only made sense that the reason we wanted them to have that conversation was because of everything, because of all of the actions or decisions that are made by each of them later on in the following scenes. But we wanted the audience to be able to track why each of them is making their own individual decisions, and not just, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. we set up that Noah is really friendly and kind of a goofball and whatever. And we also set up that Sonny is just driven and only care. But like, we wanted that specific conversation about Lucas and about their situation, just to really make sure that we were painting the clear picture of how there are those two very extreme views of the world, of our real world too, and of course they're both very much the extremes, but there are tons of people who are very much in the middle and understand that you got to kind of balance both of those thoughts. And I think we both identify as people who have to try and balance both of those, points of view in our everyday lives. So that's kind of our intention there, was just to make sure that you are tracking as an audience member, like when Noah tries to escape through connecting with Lucas, and then you have Sonny trying to escape through any means necessary, you understand where they're coming from. So that was kind of the point of that conversation, and making that clear. And then us just talking about, nobody's crazy for no reason, and you don't know what he's been through. I think we just understand, like, for us, I mean, we had lots of conversations where it was like, we don't view, you can't view people as one-dimensional people that you're just having a face-to-face conversation with. Even whether someone's projecting something onto you, you're projecting something onto them, whatever, or there's miscommunications for whatever reason. Like, you really don't know. We are firm believers of, like, you just do not know what anyone's been through. That doesn't mean you should let someone step all over you or whatever, but it can only help to try and understand someone's perspective, to be able to to communicate with them, to just be a human being and live a life around other human beings,
Sure. Yeah.
Otherwise it creates a cycle of mistrust and I think it can really lead to a lot of the problems that we have within our society as well. I don't know. Yeah.
If we're not asking like, why is someone acting this way, or why is this the way that it is, then like we're certainly doing a disservice to and it goes back to like, even the Glengarry character of like saying nobody's crazy for no reason. It's like, nobody just does these things for no reason. There's like something that's fueling it, and that so I think we were trying to do that in a couple different ways throughout the film, and and that was something that we always also wanted to focus on, especially with like Lucas being a character who's clearly coming from a system of abuse, and like that his state in the world is shaped by grandma, by his abuser, and that like it's there's bigger thematic things there, in terms of people that like might think that the system that we're in is the only system that can exist, and that it's like, oh well, if we open our eyes, we can maybe change that system. And I think when you look at Sonny and Noah as characters, Sonny was the person who wanted to play within the system. He wanted to work his way up because he felt that's the only way to do it. So he's going to play by the rules of the system, which means that you're going to have to be, in our society, aggressive. And Noah was holding out hope that we can change the system. But we kind of saw Noah as that character who's like, it's blind optimism. It's kind of blind. If you're not keeping your head on a swivel, if you're not looking at the crazy person who's sitting across from you, which in this case was Sonny, then bad things are going to happen. So we tried to represent both ends of those spectrums, and probably the most one of the ways that we decided to turn the structure on its head is we looked at Lucas kind of as the protagonist of the film, as the one who would do like a full arc, and again that's just coming from a place of needing to learn something, which is learn that you're in a system of abuse. And I think the other thing that you kind of brought out, between Sonny and his father, I think that does, I think all of us, have relationships with our parents that can be interesting or unique. And I think Devin and I both had those types of, in certain ways, not maybe always in a negative sense, but in certain ways, those relationships with our fathers. And I think, again, that's just another layer we looked at here, which is the way that it's generational pressure. And you see that with Grandma and Lucas, you see that with Sonny and his father, and kind of how our the generation above us informs us to tell us like, hey, this is the way it's supposed to be. This is the way you're supposed to make money. You're supposed to do this. Grandma saying, this is the order. This is the way it is. We decided it's all about our supply, whatever. It's like, yeah, we can't just let that inform us. So we had a lot of different stuff going. It's so interesting getting back into this to be like, oh yeah, we did that.
Right. Yeah.
It's like layer 17.
Yeah. And, and to like kind of also, I think what really hits the nail on the head too, of us commenting on no one's crazy for no reason and all that, is because we did like the character of Lucas for us was an anchor in a sense of everyone else. All the characters, we viewed them as one track. They heighten, but they don't arc necessarily. And we viewed Lucas as we were like, we are going to try to sympathize the villain, and make the audience sympathize with the villain a little bit, as much as we can. But whether they realize it or not, we are going to, he is our, from a storytelling standpoint, he's our true protagonist. He's the one that has an actual full arc. And we open the movie with him, and he has a depth to his story that, for us was the most important, because he is that nature versus nurture. And he really is what drives that point home, that Noah makes. It's like, you really can't judge somebody without knowing where they come from. And he didn't even know where he came from, in a sense. And, that's what helps him arc. So.
Yeah, I didn't even look at it, the movie, from the way that you guys are describing it, but it kind of, like, having seen it twice now, the feel like the film, looking at it from like Lucas being the protagonist, kind of flips everything else, because the world that you guys create is just, with the exception of Noah, like, to a lesser extent, like, it just kind of, everyone feels like of the villain, or like the hero in their own story. And I think that you guys balance that really well. And I think the satire and the underlining cast insurance plot really helps that. But my last question for you guys is going to be, obviously this is doing the festival circuit run right now. Are there any plans to bring this to DVD or Blu-ray?
Yeah, so we are working on distribution. We don't have an exact release date yet. We're hoping we're hoping that early next year, or by the end of spring next year, we will be out there. And yeah, I mean, we hope that Blu-ray and DVD is a part of that, for sure. So we don't know yet. As soon as we know, we are going to tell you, and you can tell everybody that and you can announce it on your podcast and help us spread the word.
Oh, I'm so excited to be able to show, like, friends and staff this film, because like I said, this film is such an incredible satire. It's a brilliant horror film, and it has great comedy, great comedic relief, and also at the same time, it has those very rare character moments that almost kind of make you want to tear up and start crying. And I think that a lot of that comes from the great script that you guys have written. Devin, it comes from performances like yours, and Josh, also comes from terrific direction at the helm of a talented visionary such as yourself. So it's still, like I said, it's still out doing the festival circuit, but where can people find more online about this movie?
Yeah, so, well, we have festivals coming up. We've got Tallgrass Film Festival and Newport Beach Film Festival at the end of this month. We're playing Film Quest in Utah at the beginning of November. If people want to really be able to keep up with what we're doing and where we're at, they can follow us on Instagram, which it's just at Keeping Company Movie. Twitter is at Keeping Co Movie. We'll always be posting updates there. In terms of being able to, those festivals I just listed are all in-person festivals. I don't think we have any virtual domestic festivals, but we do have some virtual international festivals, but they're all going to be geo-locked to those regions. So yeah, but we're playing, I want to make sure I'm not announcing anything that I'm not allowed to announce yet. But we are playing Molins Film Festival, Horror Film Festival in Spain. That'll be our Spanish premiere. I think I definitely can announce that one right now. But that'll also be in person. So unless anyone is in Spain listening to this, I won't be able to see it. But yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. But yeah, people should follow us on our social media, and we'll always keep them up to date.
Well, thank you guys so much. The movie's called Keeping Company, and be sure to look for it in 2022. I definitely think it's going to be one of the best home releases that you guys are going to see. If it costs you like $5 to rent it, it's well worth the investment. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. Josh and Devin, thank you guys. From the bottom of my heart, like I said, this movie is one of my favorite films of this year, and be sure to check these guys out when you guys have a chance to see Keeping Company.